DFS community, welcome into the Week 12 edition of one of the most accurate DFS shows in the industry. This is the Adjusted Line Play Report, where we take a deep dive into the play in the trenches to determine game scripts and player outcomes. This show is presented by Zilla Fantasy Elite. I am your host, Todd Hoffman. You can find myself over on Twitter at Todzilla1337. You can also find Zilla Fantasy Elite over on Twitter at Zilla Fantasy. As always, folks, today's show powered by Rain Total Body Fuel. Looking to make it rain some additional cash in DFS? Tune in to the Adjusted Line Play Report from Zilla Fantasy Elite. Follow host Todd Hoffman while he delivers the most accurate DFS advice in the industry and make it rain. All right, today's flavor, folks, rainbow sherbet. Kicking off our Saturday morning, right? All right. As always, ingest. Rain does not sponsor me, even though I wish they would. Something I probably shouldn't be drinking anyway, but all right. So for those of you who are new to this, first time seeing the Adjusted Line Play Report, what this is all about is we go through and we take the offensive and defensive line play and pit them against each other and see how those matchups go. We always hear in football that the games are won and lost in the trenches. So why does nothing in fantasy anyway, why does that nothing look at the offensive and defensive line play if that's how the games are won and lost? So what we do here on the Adjusted Line Play Report is look at exactly that, the play in the trenches. Who's good at offensive pass protection, who's good at the pass rush, and same with the run blocking. So that's what we're going to do. Typically, if we have some island games, we'll go over those, but there's no Germany games today. We did have a Black Friday game, Jets in Miami yesterday, but if you didn't catch the Thanksgiving Day slate, go back and look at that. Some pretty good calls on there and made a lot of money in DFS on those, top 500 in one of the tournaments on FanDuel out of 360,000 entrants. So this stuff is very good. You can it's a lot easier to predict these island game matchups and what's going to happen in those. And then kind of using that also to help your start set decisions for redraft, your dynasty leagues, things like that. It's very good for that. And hopefully you can build a DFS lineup ultimately from this to win a tournament, make yourself a nice chunk of change there. And if you do that, let me know. Would be very happy to hear that. All right, with all of that being said, let's get underway. We go from the number one game total on the slate all the way down to the lowest game total on the slate, and we hit up every single game on the main slate and then get into the Sunday night and Monday night matchups as well for island game matchups. So number one game on the slate, we have Buffalo going into Philadelphia here. It's a 48.5 point Vegas game total, which is pretty solid here. Again, that's the first ranked one on the slate. We have Philadelphia coming in as 3-point home favorites, giving them a 25.75 team implied total and giving Buffalo a 22.75 team implied total. So that's the number two team total on the slate for Philadelphia, number 7 on the slate for Buffalo. It's a 10-game slate, so 20 teams to put that into perspective. Getting into the away team, Buffalo offensive pass protection. Again, this is adjusted sack rate. Buffalo number 2, so really, really good at not taking sacks. Philadelphia number 10 in the defensive pass rush, so they've been getting home to the quarterback, especially in situations where you might not expect it. Both top 10 teams. Actually kind of in the favor of Buffalo here, but in these scenarios, I'd like to say, hey, Buffalo maybe not particularly used to taking some sacks in a situation like this where they're facing a defense that's top 10. They might be under a little bit more duress than they're perhaps used to in a game, so take that into consideration. Ball might be coming out a little bit quicker if they're going to be under pressure in this matchup. Getting into the offensive pass DVOA, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. Buffalo still number 2 in the offensive pass DVOA, so they've been very efficient when they've been passing the ball. Philadelphia's defense, though, at number 19, so this is a pretty big gap there. Buffalo top 2, Philadelphia actually below average in terms of their defensive pass DVOA. And this is where Philadelphia has really been gashed all season, is in the air game. With that in mind, I think that's how Buffalo is going to end up having to move the ball, kind of looking at the run game there. But number 2 versus number 19 is pretty big favor there. Buffalo should be fairly explosive when they are passing the ball. I do like a lot of their pass catching options. Obviously, Philadelphia seems to be giving it up really big to the number 1 receiver, so Diggs is going to be a pretty solid option, I think, this week. And Kincaid's kind of filled in for Diggs in the last couple of weeks with Knox out in terms of being a really solid, almost like 1B option there in Buffalo. And sometimes the 1A, because Diggs has struggled in a few games here. But those are the main 2 ones I'm interested in the Buffalo pass attack. You can also look at Khalil Shakir. Gabe Davis is not one that I'd be particularly interested in. That's typically one where Buffalo's going to have a lot of time to pass. Gabe Davis tends to do well in those particular matchups, and not ones where they're going to be under duress a little bit. He's just not somebody I don't think he's one that can get open and have a pretty solid showing, play in and play out. So he's one of those where if you got a lot of time, he's going to see a few passes come his way deep where he can make something happen with them. Getting into the Buffalo run blocking side, they're number 2, so 2s across the board so far. Philadelphia number 9 in defensive run stopping, so another 2 versus top 10 matchup here. Nothing to write home about. Buffalo's been pretty effective running the ball. They might be a little bit less effective than they're perhaps used to in this matchup with Philadelphia. Philadelphia has truly been pretty good against the run all season, even last season with a lot of the same people coming back. And then run DVOA, Buffalo 6, Philadelphia 5. Typically when these are really close matchups like that, I say if they have a stud on their team on offense, they're going to kind of overcome that offensive line stalemate, especially in the run game. If you got somebody that's just dominant there, they're going to be able to perform a little bit better than that defense on the other side. I don't think Buffalo necessarily has that, so it's kind of just an even up matchup. People that are going to normally get the ball in the offense will continue to get the ball, and that seems to be James Cook in his normal role. Once they get down the goal line, it seems like he's not the one in there trying to punch in anything. So keep that in mind. He's probably going to be okay, but DFS purposes, I'm probably trying to attack Buffalo in the pass game here, especially with them being the number 1 game on the slate and actually trailing. According to the Vegas line, they're predicted to be behind in this particular matchup. Getting into the Philadelphia side, they're number 22 in offensive pass protection, so they've been taking some sacks. Buffalo actually number 5 in the defensive pass rush, so they've been getting sacks on defense. That might continue here. I wouldn't be shocked to see Buffalo's defense have a few sacks in this particular matchup. However, in the past DVOA, Philadelphia number 9, pretty explosive there, top 10. Buffalo right in the middle at 16. Slightly in the favor here of Philadelphia. Usually in these type of situations, if they're going to be under a little bit of duress, I'd expect the ball to come out a little bit quicker. So running backs and tight ends would get targeted a little bit more. I don't know what Dallas Goedert looks like this week. He hasn't played the last few weeks with I don't know if it's a back injury or foot injury, whatever it is. He's been out the last couple of weeks. Probably a fade in terms of if he comes back. He might not be 100%, but a lot of times A.J. Brown, he's going to get a lot of those passes when they're under a little bit of duress, but can be a little bit explosive. That's typically this season been A.J. Brown's forte, so I don't hate A.J. Brown in this particular matchup. DeAndre Swift also in play in terms of getting a few more catches. Gainwell is also involved in the pass game pretty frequently, kind of depending on the situation. He's in there a lot with 2-minute drills. Getting into the Philadelphia run blocking side, they're number 13 in run blocking, Buffalo 5th in stopping the run, so they're pretty solid there in stopping the run on a play in and play out basis. However, Philadelphia number 5 in offensive run DVOA, Buffalo 14 in defensive run DVOA. So very similar where the line play, adjusted sack rate and adjusted running back rate is in the favor of Buffalo. So on a play in and play out basis, maybe a little bit less efficient than they're used to, but overall that DVOA aspect is in the favor of Philadelphia's offense, which tells me they're going to be okay moving the ball here on a drive-to-drive basis. Something to keep in note here, Philadelphia actually plays pretty slow. A lot of their things are in red. Buffalo as well. They're basically no better than about average in terms of pace of play. So it's a little bit interesting. They do play a little bit slower, but both offenses probably very explosive, which is part of the problem there. So keep that in mind. Looks like both offenses should be okay. Buffalo more so in the pass game should be pretty explosive. Philadelphia should be okay just overall in general, but maybe taking a few hits behind the line of scrimmage, both in the pass game and the run game. All right, getting into the number 2 game on the slate, it's Jacksonville at Houston. This has actually been bet down. Used to be tied here with Buffalo, Philadelphia. It's been bet down 1 full point here. So now we have Jacksonville heading into Houston. Jacksonville actually 1.5 point road favorites. 47.5 Vegas game total, again, second best on the slate. Jacksonville team implied total at 24.5 there as 1.5 point road favorites. Third best on the slate. Houston at 23 is a sixth best team total on the slate. Getting into the Jacksonville offensive side, they're number 16 in pass protection, Houston 17. That's pretty even. Don't worry about anything in terms of sack rate here. It seems to be pretty even. The defensive pass DVOA, Jacksonville 13, Houston 22. Jacksonville kind of, a little bit above average, almost peeking into the top 10 there. Houston pretty well below average there at 22. As is just telling me, I think on a full game basis, Jacksonville should be pretty effective passing the ball. They shouldn't be under a ton of duress here with Trevor Lawrence. The one thing is Houston did get Stingley back the last couple of weeks, and he's been pretty solid. But again, this is kind of suggesting on paper Jacksonville's air game should be fine. I did hear some people talking about kind of the rate of defense that they play, man versus zone. It sounds like maybe it's going to favor Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram in this particular matchup versus a Calvin Ridley. So keep that in mind. We did see Ridley go off last week. He's probably going to be pretty popular in DFS this week, assuming that this is going to be a high game total and kind of a shootout scenario. Getting into the run blocking side, Jacksonville 30th, Houston number 6. This is a huge favor for Houston's defense. Should see Travis Etienne get hit behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage pretty frequently. Based off of this info, the run DVOA is not quite as bad, but similar. Jacksonville 23rd in offensive run DVOA, Houston 12th in defensive run DVOA. Wouldn't expect Travis Etienne to be very effective on the ground, and looks like Jacksonville is going to have to move it through the air. Typically, when I see this, it's not a tremendous matchup for the offense through the air, and it's actually a really poor matchup for the offense on the ground. These, a lot of times, will end up having the kicker be super good for this. So Jacksonville's kicker, if you got an option between them and someone else, I really do like the Jacksonville kicker in this particular matchup. Wouldn't be shocked to see him, kick 2 or 3 field goals in this. If you're doing prop bets, certainly over 1.5 field goals. Well within play here. It's in a dome. They're projected to win, but be close. So he's probably going to get quite a few field goal attempts. Getting into the Houston side, they are number 10 in offensive pass protection. Jacksonville 25th in the defensive pass rush. Houston should have plenty of time to throw based off of this, not taking a ton of sacks. So keep that in mind. That should be very good for Houston's pass game in terms of having time. Houston is number 4 in offensive pass DVOA. Jacksonville, surprisingly, they're at defensive pass DVOA of number 8, so they've been pretty effective. Really what this is saying is pretty even. Studs eat in those particular scenarios. If you want to think of Tank Dell as a stud, be my guest. He's been pretty good. Nico Collins has been pretty solid. If they're going to have time to throw, both of those two might be having a pretty solid game in this particular matchup. If they're finding it a little bit more of a struggle to pass, you could see Dalton Schultz maybe getting a few more targets his way in this matchup. Getting into the run blocking, it's pretty bad here for Houston as well. So Jacksonville 3rd and actually in stopping the run. Houston a little bit below average at 18th in the offensive run blocking. Wouldn't expect Devin Singletary to have a very good game in this particular scenario, especially with the run DVOA being number 2 for Jacksonville, 27 for Houston. I think Pierce is going to be back anyway, but regardless, it's a full fade on both Pierce and Singletary in this. Especially I've heard Singletary is going to be pretty popular in DFS if Pierce doesn't play this week. And that to me is a massive fade. This is not looking like a very good run game matchup, and the pass game is looking like, hey, they should have some time, but they're not going to be necessarily super explosive, but they should be able to move the ball through the air a little bit better than on the ground. Again, similar situation to Jacksonville. This could be a big field goal fest with Houston's kicker probably. I think it's Amendola. He's their kicker and punter, having a pretty solid week. So both of those two are in play, especially if it's going to be a close back and forth affair, with both offenses being okay but not awesome. But yeah, I can see why it's getting bet down a little bit. It doesn't look like too great of matchups on the ground. And then Jacksonville's air game looks pretty solid, but Houston, despite having some time to throw, might not be as explosive as we're used to. All right, getting into the third game on the slate, we have Los Angeles and Arizona here. Actually, I think this was even up on Tuesday when I did the original line play report. I think this was an even matchup. It's now a 2.5-point road favorite for Los Angeles. It's a 45 Vegas game total. That didn't change much, but now LA favored to win by 2.5 instead of a pick 'em like it was on Tuesday. That gives LA 23.75 team implied total, fourth best team total on the slate. Arizona at 21.25 is the ninth best on the slate. Again, dome game here in Arizona. Offensive pass protection for the Rams is 11th. Arizona Cardinals at 13th. Pretty even matchup, nothing to write home about. Pretty standard day at the office in terms of offensive and defensive line play there. The offensive pass DVOA, though, for the Rams is 19. Arizona all the way down at 29. This should be very good for the Rams in terms of, hey, they're going to have a standard amount of time to throw, and they should be fairly effective when they're passing the ball, moving it on the Cardinals here. So don't be shocked to see Stafford have a pretty solid week in terms of efficiency here, getting the ball to probably Coop and Nakua if they both play this week. If they don't, if one of them sits, you could look at Tutu Atwell as a deep dart throw. They should be okay in this matchup in the pass game. The run blocking looks pretty juicy for the Rams. 14th in offensive run blocking, 30th for Arizona in defensive run stopping. And then the DVOA 14th again for the Rams, and the Cardinals at 29. So it looks like the Rams, that is, got rid of Darrell Henderson. Thanks for playing. The couple of games that we had before Kyren Williams came back from IR, now that he's back from IR, they just jettisoned him, which tells me that Kyren Williams is definitely ready to play. And he's probably going to have a pretty solid week against Arizona in this particular matchup, especially if they're projected to win by 2.5 here or be leading. Wouldn't be shocked to see him get a pretty decent volume in his first game back, especially if they're getting rid of Darrell Henderson. They must believe that he is good to go and fully healthy. I'm not necessarily worried about keeping him on the team for injury purposes. Getting into the Arizona side, they're 20th in offensive pass protection. Rams at 15th, middle of the pack there in pass rush. Nothing too big here. A slight favor of the Rams, maybe a little bit of a pass rush here, but nothing too crazy. Getting into the pass DVOA, the Rams 18th on defense, Cardinals 26th in the pass DVOA on offense. Again, a lot of these numbers came without Kyler Murray there, so it's a little bit of a change up here with Kyler Murray in there. I think these numbers actually have been improving for the sack rate with Kyler in there the last couple of weeks. But really on paper, kind of a mediocre matchup, nothing to write home about. I don't think Arizona necessarily has any studs in their pass game. It's probably just going to continue as is the last couple of weeks with a lot of targets kind of going to the tight ends, and then maybe some shots to Hollywood Brown that haven't been super effective as of yet. Getting into the run blocking side, we have Arizona at 23rd in offensive run blocking, so pretty poor. Fortunately for them, the Rams are actually 25th across the board there in the run stopping categories for both run stopping and run DVOA. Arizona's run DVOA is actually number 12. So this is telling me that Arizona, if they're going to move the ball effectively, it's probably going to be via the ground, which is making James Conner look like a better play to me. in this. I do like both options for both the Rams and the Cardinals on their running backs this week. Actually, if I remember right, I looked at, was it FanDuel, and I saw that Kyren Williams was very expensive. He's like the third highest running back on the slate, despite not having played in 4 weeks. I thought that was kind of interesting. I can't remember if that was FanDuel or DraftKings. I just was shocked to see that as the case this week. It's like, wow, he's coming off an injury and he's coming back at that price. But remember, he was very, very, very dominant as a running back here before that injury. So certainly could come back to fruition. He's probably going to be very low rostered if that's the case, in a good matchup here for Kyren Williams. So a low rostered person just because of his price, in a solid spot here where no one's going to play him. That's always a very intriguing play for tournaments in my book. All right, getting into the number 4 game on the slate, we have Tampa Bay going into Indianapolis. Here we have Indianapolis as 2.5-point road favorites. It's a 44.5-point Vegas game total. Again, 4th best on the slate. That 2.5-point favorite gives Indianapolis a 23.5 team implied total, in Tampa Bay 21. That's the 5th best team total on the slate for Indianapolis, 10th best for the Bucs. Getting into the Bucs, they're number 9 in pass protection. Colts number 11 in defensive pass rush. Tampa Bay has been fairly good at not taking sacks. They might be a little bit more under duress here. Indianapolis almost cracking the top 10 in the pass rush category. So keep that in mind, maybe a little bit less time than they're used to throw it. The pass DVOA for Tampa Bay is 16, Indianapolis number 11. Again, this was kind of telling me that might have a little bit more pressure than they're used to passing the ball, and they're not going to be necessarily super effective or efficient in the air trying to move the ball against this Indianapolis defense. But they do have Godwin and Evans, who are actually pretty good. Especially if they're going to be under duress a little bit. I think Godwin and Otten, the tight end, might see a little bit more targets if they're going to be a little bit less efficient in this matchup. Looking at maybe fading Evans a little bit more than usual in this particular matchup. Getting into the run blocking, Tampa Bay dead last at number 32. Indianapolis 20th in the defensive run stopping, so kind of middle of the pack, below average there. Tampa Bay might find a little extra room to run the ball, but they've just been bad for the last couple of years in that particular system. The defensive run DVOA for Tampa Bay, number 30, Indianapolis 24th. This is a little bit more of an even matchup, kind of suggesting that the run game might be a little bit more effective than Tampa Bay is used to in this. If they're going to be under a little bit more duress than perhaps are used to as well with that Indianapolis defense, Rachaad White certainly in play, especially in PPR leagues and DraftKings, where those points per reception add up pretty quick. Indianapolis does play very fast, which could play into Tampa Bay needing to pass a little bit more, which is also good for Rachaad White in a scenario like that. Getting into the Indianapolis side, they're number 13th in offensive pass protection, Tampa Bay 14 in pass rush. Again, nothing to write home about there, just a standard day at the office for pass protection. The pass DVOA, Tampa Bay 20th, Indianapolis 17, going into a scenario where studs eat. And it does seem like Indianapolis and Tampa Bay Indianapolis does have two solid receivers in Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. Pittman I'd be a little bit more interested in than Downs. Downs was kind of dealing with some injuries, and Pittman's really been solid this entire season in terms of garnering targets. So I think that continues this week, and he should be the one that actually pops off with a pretty solid matchup, or a pretty solid game in this particular matchup. Getting into the run blocking, Tampa Bay is very good here on defense. Indianapolis 27th in offensive run blocking, so on a play-to-play basis, they've been kind of hit behind the line of scrimmage, at the line of scrimmage quite often. Tampa Bay number 10 in run stopping, so they've been pretty good at hitting people behind the line of scrimmage. That's probably going to be the case in this particular matchup. The run DVOAs, though, Indianapolis number 8, Tampa Bay number 3. Indianapolis number 8, because they did score tons and tons of touchdowns with Zach Moss when he was in there, and he was super effective, scoring a ton of fantasy points, which is kind of why this DVOA number is so high. Tampa Bay's defense has been very good at stopping that. So what this is telling me, like, the matchup actually in the pass game is probably a little bit better than or quite a bit better than the run game here for Indianapolis. So kind of fading Jonathan Taylor and focusing more on a Michael Pittman, probably in a one-off scenario, not necessarily interested in stacking Gardner Minshew with him in downs, but that's certainly a play that you could do, especially with them playing so quickly. But really, I think it's going to just focus more and more attention to Pittman. Wouldn't be shocked to see him with 12 to 15 targets in this matchup, 8 to 10, 8 to 12 catches, kind of making his name heard this week 12. All right, getting into the fifth game on the slate, Kansas City and Las Vegas. Got an interesting one here with the number one game total for team implied totals. But Las Vegas, they're pretty low. So 43.5 Vegas game total here, fifth best on the slate. Kansas City going into Las Vegas as of Saturday morning. They are 10-point home favorites. This is in between, like, a lot of the platforms are at -10, a couple at minus 9.5, and then one, I think, at -9. So the vast majority are at about -10. That's where we put it at, -10 for Kansas City. As I said previously, these scenarios where the home team is an underdog by 10 or more points, those home teams cover that spread at a 90% clip. It didn't happen the last time, but it really does seem like, hey, this looks like a really, really bad matchup for the home team. They're going to get crushed by this team coming in. And for whatever reason, a lot of times that home team just plays a lot better and ends up covering that 10-point spread. Not saying Vegas is going to come in here and win. Just saying, do not be shocked that they keep the game within 10 points of Kansas City. We've seen Kansas City kind of struggle just in general, not really blowing people away. So wouldn't be shocked to see Vegas keep this within 10 points. If you're a betting person, the 90% rate is a very, very intriguing clip. All right. Getting into the Vegas game totals here, Kansas City 26.75 is the first or number one highest game total on the slate. Vegas down there at 16.75 is 17th out of 20. Getting into the pass protection for Kansas City, they are number one. Vegas 24th in the pass rush. Kansas City should have plenty of time to throw. They don't take a lot of sacks anyway. This is really, really good for those deeper throws. As we have seen throughout the last couple of seasons, Justin Watson has really been the one that you want in the deep threat. MVS does run these deep routes, and we saw him drop a basically would-be touchdown for a game winner, about 50 yards right off his hands, going into the end zone. But it seems like Justin Watson the last couple of years has really been the deep play threat for Kansas City that has come through. MVS certainly does that as well, and will have one, maybe two games every season where he ends up, catching 3 or 4 balls for 90 yards and a touchdown, or 2 touchdowns just because they connected on a few deep ones. That could certainly be the case here with Vegas, but really Justin Watson seems to be Kansas City's number one wide receiver right now. And I would trust him to have a pretty solid week with that pass protection the way it is. Getting into the pass DVOA for Kansas City, number 6, Las Vegas 14th. This is kind of suggestive that a little bit favor of Kansas City. They might not be hyper explosive. They should have plenty of time to throw the ball and move it down the field. But again, a lot of times if it's going to be something similar to this, Kelsey could have a big game as well. Who are you going to pair with him if you're stacking Mahomes? Could be nobody. That might be the right answer, but really Justin Watson, as I had said before, is typically their deep threat. MVS always a threat to steal, if you want to say that, a lot of those yards and a touchdown. Rashee Rice, outside of those two, has kind of been the mainstay in terms of wide receivers. Getting into the run blocking side, Kansas City number 22, Vegas 29th, and stopping the run slightly in the favor here of Kansas City. Not too bad for Isaiah Pacheco. The run DVOA, Kansas City 18th, Las Vegas 21. This is really kind of saying that, hey, Kansas City is kind of middle of the pack, a little bit below average in terms of running the ball. In a game like this, they might be a little bit more effective than they're used to running it. Isaiah Pacheco certainly in play. Probably not going to be somebody that I target very heavily in DFS, though, with the Kansas City pass game looking like it's going to be the one moving the ball pretty effectively. Getting into the Vegas side, they are 23rd in offensive pass protection. Kansas City's defense, third across the board here in the pass categories on defense. I expect Kansas City to be getting after Las Vegas. Kansas City's defense certainly in play in DFS in terms of having a huge week. Defensive pass DVOA third, Las Vegas pass DVOA 29th. They got a rookie, Aiden O'Connell there. Las Vegas projected to be down by a lot, probably passing a lot. This is good for Kansas City's defense and generating sacks, sack fumbles, interceptions, pick sixes. You name it, Kansas City's defense should be really solid this week if you got them in your seasonal leagues. Very good for you because I think they're going to have a great week. The run blocking, though, is very interesting. Las Vegas 25th and 29th in run blocking and run DVOA, so not very good. They're both in the red. Fortunately for them, Kansas City's been really bad in this regard. They're 27th and 27th. So Vegas might actually find it a lot easier to run the ball in Kansas City. Again, as I said, like that 10-point home underdog, I could see Las Vegas actually being very successful running it with Jacobs here. They just continue to pound it, keep the ball out of Kansas City's hands, and then this game ends up being a lot closer than people are expecting it to be, with Jacobs kind of having one of those solid weeks. Outside of that, I'm not super interested in the Vegas players. I know we do see Devontae Adams get targeted like crazy with Aiden O'Connell in there. There's just going to be no time to throw it, which actually probably ends up being a better game for Michael Myers and Josh Jacobs, getting some of these dump offs from Aiden O'Connell. But really, that's how I can attack the Vegas team. If I grab any pieces, Josh Jacobs or Michael Myers will be the favorite choice for myself. All right, New Orleans at Atlanta is the sixth game on the slate. For a game total at 41.5, we have New Orleans heading into Atlanta as 1.5-point road favorites, giving them a 21.5 team implied total, eighth best on the slate. Atlanta, 20 team implied total. That is the 11th best on the slate. Getting into the New Orleans side, they're number 19 in offensive pass protection. Atlanta 28th. This is suggestive that New Orleans should have plenty of time to throw. Don't know if it's going to be Derek Carr or Jameis Winston this week, but they should have some time to throw against this Atlanta defense. The pass DVOA for New Orleans below average at 22, but Atlanta bottom 3 at 30th. This is suggesting that the pass game should be very effective. One thing to note, Michael Thomas now on IR. Won't be playing for sure for the next 4 weeks. That leaves Rashid Shaheed and A.T. Perry kind of as the next guys up in terms of wide receivers. What ends up happening, it might just go more to Chris Olave, the tight ends, Juwan Johnson and Taysom Hill maybe gets a little bit more involved, and Shaheed and A.T. Perry maybe run some more routes, but maybe aren't targeted any more than what they're perhaps used to. Getting into the run blocking side, New Orleans number 10, Atlanta 13th in stopping the run. Run DVOA for New Orleans 13, Atlanta 15. So those are pretty close matchups. Typically in those scenarios, we say studs eat. Alvin Kamara, I'm not sure at this stage of his career if he's a stud in the run game anymore. He's certainly a stud in the pass game. But this is kind of suggesting that he's going to be just fine. It's not a bad matchup. It's not a great matchup. Just a standard day at the office for him. Wouldn't venture to see him have an okay game there on the ground. Atlanta on offense, 25th in their pass protection. New Orleans, 29th in the defensive pass rush, so they haven't been getting home. Atlanta might find themselves with a little bit more time than they're used to throw the ball, which is good for Desmond Ridder. Unfortunately for them, the pass DVOAs are kind of flip-flop. So Atlanta's still at 25 in the pass DVOA, but New Orleans rockets all the way up to top 10 at number 10 in the pass DVOA. This is telling me Atlanta's probably not going to be very effective or explosive in the pass game. Kind of leading me to believe, hey, if they got some time to throw the ball, but they're not going to be very explosive in a situation like that, that might be more of a Jonnu Smith type week, or kind of just dumping some stuff off to London kind of underneath. We've seen him be explosive, but maybe not in this particular matchup. those are probably the two people I'm most interested in. Kind of fading Pitts a little bit. I know he's certainly got the talent to be better, but Desmond Ridder coming in, we already saw him kind of make some hay with Jonnu Smith and Drake London in the past, and I think that's just going to kind of continue in this particular matchup. The run game for Atlanta, they're 21st in run blocking. New Orleans quite better at number 12. Not a huge discrepancy there, but in the favor of New Orleans, which tells me on a play-to-play basis, Atlanta's not going to be as effective on the ground. New Orleans, 19 on the defensive DVOA. Atlanta, 17 in run DVOA. Again, this is telling me Atlanta going to have some time to throw, but not be very effective, moving the ball in the air, just kind of dink and dunk stuff. And the run game is going to be kind of, average at best. If it's going to be a close game, I don't hate the kicker for Atlanta in this particular matchup. Both teams do play fairly fast, a lot of green here on their pace of play. So this could end up, in a dome, getting a lot of plays off. Maybe you see quite a few receptions, even though they're not explosive for Atlanta, and running the ball a little bit. But really, I think the kicker here from Atlanta, Younghoe Koo, I think was injured going into this week. I'm not entirely sure if he's going to be healthy for this game, but he would be a solid option if you got that option there as well for Atlanta. But really, no one I'm super interested in playing in DFS outside of a kicker if you're playing like an island game scenario with Atlanta and New Orleans. All right, that's the sixth best game on the slate. We have two of them tied for the seventh best. We'll head up here, Carolina and Tennessee. And then the other one is Cleveland, Denver. Carolina heading into Tennessee. Tennessee 3.5-point home favorites here. All the way down at 36.5. Really ugly total here for Vegas. And what's sad is there's other games that are just as bad or worse than this. With that 3.5-point favorite, Tennessee at 20 points at 11th, tied for 11th, I believe, there on the slate. Carolina at 16.5 is the second worst team implied total on the slate. Getting into the Carolina offensive pass protection, number 28, Tennessee 12th in the defensive pass rush, so they've been able to get home. I'd expect Carolina to be under a little bit of duress here from Tennessee's defense as they're trying to pass the ball. Fortunately for Carolina, the DVOAs are a little bit closer. Carolina second to the worst at number 31 in the pass DVOA. Tennessee 28 in the defensive pass DVOA. This is telling me Tennessee's probably going to be getting a few sacks in here, but Carolina's maybe going to be a little bit more effective than they're used to in the pass game. It's probably going to have to be quicker passes, kind of more underneath stuff. So I wouldn't be shocked to see the tight ends get a little bit more involved, the running backs get a little bit more involved, and then really a good solid game here from Adam Thielen. He's kind of dotted out the last month or so after a hot start. He might be a little bit cheaper in DFS this week, and maybe somebody that you can get as a potential in a full PPR league. Not necessarily interested in something like FanDuel where it kind of requires a touchdown, but I wouldn't be shocked either to see him score a touchdown in this as like the kind of the only option in the pass game here, especially with the run game being so poor. Getting into the run blocking, Carolina 24th, Tennessee 16th. A little bit in the favor there of Tennessee's defense on a play-to-play basis. They should be pretty effective at stopping the run. DVOA for Carolina's offense, 26th. Tennessee, number 4 in the defensive run DVOA. This is really indicative that Carolina is going to struggle running the ball. Really should be getting stuffed and then not being very explosive at all. I do not mind Tennessee's defense in a matchup like this with Carolina kind of struggling. Could get a lot of sacks here. And maybe some interceptions there from Bryce Young, which has been pretty common feat this week, or this season. But really, Carolina struggling to run the ball. Pass game option, really, Adam Thielen, and that's about all I'm interested in terms of any sort of play on the Carolina side. Getting into the Tennessee side, very interesting here. The 30th in offensive pass protection, Carolina 26th in the defensive pass rush. Similar story here where Tennessee hasn't been very good, but Carolina also not very good. So Tennessee actually might find themselves with a little bit more time to throw the ball this week, which could be very good for DeAndre Hopkins. We've seen him really be a deep threat for this particular team. Don't hate him this week. The pass DVOA is Carolina 15th, so middle of the pack. Tennessee 21st, a little bit below average there. Again, with a little bit of extra time, I think DeAndre Hopkins can overcome this DVOA aspect and have a pretty solid week this week in terms of being able to move the ball in the air. The run blocking is where it really gets interesting for Tennessee. Might be the final good Derrick Henry week of his career. We'll see about that. Tennessee number 9 in the offensive run blocking. Carolina 31st in defensive run stopping. Huge favor there for Tennessee, top 10. Carolina bottom of the barrel there at 31. Really on a play-to-play basis, Tennessee should be very effective running the ball. Combine that with an effective pass game, and I think Henry's in store for a really solid week. Run DVOA for Carolina is dead last at 32. Tennessee number 11, so really close to top 10 there. I really think it's going to be Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins just dominating this game. As it starts out the first half, perhaps it's a little bit closer of a matchup. And we see Hopkins have a pretty solid first half. Henry have a pretty effective first half, and then as the second half rolls around, Tennessee kind of dominating this game. We could see Derrick Henry really get into that 25 to 30 carry category and, kind of the 110, 150 yards and 1 or 2 touchdown type of week. I think that's certainly in play for him. In spite of this very low Vegas game total, I think Tennessee actually does pretty well in this matchup. All right, let's get into the Cleveland-Denver game, which is, again, tied for 7th best on the slates. This is a little bit closer matchup, a 1.5-point home favorite here for Denver. Cleveland heading into Denver here as the underdogs. Again, that 36.5 Vegas game total gives Denver a 19 team implied total, which is the 13th best on the slate. Close matchup here. Cleveland 17.5 team implied total is the 16th best on the slate. Getting in the Cleveland offensive side, number 18 in pass protection, Denver 20th in the pass rush. Nothing to write home about. Similar to the pass DVOA, Cleveland 28th, Denver 31st in defensive pass DVOA. Really what this is telling me, we do have a change. A lot of these numbers were with Watson and P.J. Walker in the past. We do have DTR now at quarterback. He should be okay in this particular matchup. This is telling me he's not going to be under duress, and he actually might be a little bit more effective passing the ball than we're used to. I think Cooper could be in play in terms of someone that you want, and Elijah Moore, more of a dart throw in this matchup. We did see 15 targets, I think, go to the tight end there, so I wouldn't be shocked as well to see him get heavily involved. David Njoku there getting those 15 targets, I think, in that game from DTR last week. So keep that in mind. That could be a trend starting here. But again, with the low Vegas game total, Njoku is more of a dart throw for me in a matchup like this. Getting into the run blocking side, Cleveland 26th, so not super great there. Fortunately for them, Denver 32 and 31 in the defensive run DVOA. Denver really has been getting run on quite extensively. I know a lot of this came from, I believe, the Miami game where they just got torched, but really we've seen Minnesota, the Vikings just played them last week. They have not been very effective running the ball at all this whole entire week or this whole entire season, and then they go into Denver last week and be very, very successful. Both Madison and the backup Ty Chandler had like 80 yards and just looked really, really efficient with their touches. I would expect this to continue for Cleveland. So James Ford certainly in play here. Kareem Hunt, even on his touches, could be pretty effective. The run DVOA, Cleveland 21st on offense. That's 10 better than the 31st ranked there for Denver. So really, Cleveland looking like they should be okay moving the ball. The air game isn't a negative. The run game certainly looks like a positive, and that they should be a lot more effective running the ball than they're used to. So I wouldn't be shocked to see that be kind of a decent game there for Cleveland, despite this game total being so low. Denver side, 27th in offensive pass. Okay, let's just get in. Cleveland's number 1 across the board. Defensive pass rush, defensive pass DVOA, defensive run stopping, defensive run DVOA. Absolutely dominant defense, number 1 across the board. So we'll just get into the Denver side. Just know that Cleveland is number 1 across the board on defense. Denver 27th in offensive pass protection, 15th in offensive pass DVOA. They should be under a lot of duress here with that pass rush, which is not boding well for Russell Wilson in this particular matchup. They are middle of the pack in terms of pass DVOA. They're probably going to need to get the ball out quickly. With that in mind, it's probably going to be a lot of dump-offs to the running backs. Denver already gets a lot of pass attempts to the running backs with Sean Payton there. I think he's smart enough to realize Cleveland's defense just going to be getting after him, not to set up anything super long in terms of the pass plays. So expect a lot of tight end involvement and a lot of running back targets here. So Javonte Williams, Samaj Pirine, and maybe Jaleel McLaughlin. We've seen him get involved as well. Pirine did have like the 7 receptions, I believe, last week. He could get involved again this week. I believe, Javonte Williams, a decent option this week, especially if he's going to get some targets. Pirine and McLaughlin, really, really deep dart throws in DFS if you want somebody that's probably ultra cheap in a really bad game total game here. Denver in run blocking, number 8 and number 19 in the run DVOA. So really, I wouldn't expect the run game to be super effective. Probably a little bit worse than what they're used to. So looking at this, if Javonte Williams is going to get there, it's going to be via the pass game. We did see last week where he didn't really get involved in the pass game compared to the other two. So that's why I say those deep dart throws maybe look a little bit better here. And just the way that this is looking with Cleveland's defense being so dominant and their offense looking like it's going to be pretty solid, I'm just going to go ahead. There we go. Give that purge siren. Cleveland with the upset here. I know Denver's favored at home. We've seen them win 4 in a row. I just think Cleveland takes this game here in Denver. I think Denver struggles to move the ball, and Cleveland really doesn't look like their offense is going to be too bad here. And I think it's just going to be a dominant performance from Cleveland overall. And we see Cleveland take this game in Denver. All right. Let's get into the number 9 game on the slate here, which is Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. Probably so low because Joe Burrow is no longer playing for Cincinnati this season. This is an ugly 35.5 Vegas game total, 9th best on the slate. We actually have Pittsburgh as 2-point road favorites at 18.75 team implied total, which is the 14th best on the slate. Cincinnati at 16.75 is the 17th best on the slate. Pittsburgh, 12th in offensive pass protection. Cincinnati, number 9 in defensive pass rush. Pretty even matchup there, nothing to write home about. Pittsburgh, number 20 in pass DVOA. Cincinnati, 13th in pass DVOA. Slight favor again in Cincinnati's favor here. Wouldn't expect Pittsburgh to be super great on offense here in the pass game. Just keep that in mind. It's a ho-hum matchup. Not terrible, but also not good. So Deontay Johnson, Jaylen Warren, always in play when these are kind of like stalemates. Pickens is certainly, I think, a good receiver. We just haven't seen him be very effective since Deontay Johnson has returned to the lineup. Could we see that change this week? Potentially. It's not like a terrible matchup here for Pittsburgh this week. Getting into the run blocking side, though, it's a little bit better for Pittsburgh, number 15 in offensive run blocking, Cincinnati 28th. So Pittsburgh should be pretty effective running the ball. And the run DVOA for Pittsburgh, number 7, Cincinnati 30th. This is finally like a Najee Harris week. I don't think that pass game is going to be very effective. Pittsburgh is favored by 2 here on the road. We could see Najee Harris with a pretty solid game here. I'm not sure what he's looking like in terms of pricing. He hasn't been like a solid play for most of the season. We've been here and there, but Jaylen Warren really the more explosive back. I could see both of these backs having pretty solid weeks where Jaylen Warren's being very effective with his touches on the ground, also getting some pass catches, and then Najee Harris also being very effective on the ground. Getting into the Cincinnati side, they're 6th in offensive pass protection, again with Joe Burrow in there. Pittsburgh 16th in the pass rush, so middle of the pack there in terms of getting home. The pass DVOA, though, for Pittsburgh, number 7, Cincinnati 18th. it was telling me Cincinnati's probably not going to be very efficient with the ball, despite having maybe some time to throw it. But again, the adjusted sack rate with Joe Burrow in there probably going to be different than the adjusted sack rate with Jake Browning. Jake Browning, I do believe, is a pretty competent backup, though. He looked really good in the preseason, looked really good last week in relief of Joe Burrow. So I think he's plenty capable of getting this offense at least moving. Really, when this comes into play, I always look for those friend handshakes, whatever, on the field. So the number one target probably going to get hyper targeted, and then also some of these guys that the backup's probably working with in practice. So wouldn't be shocked to see someone like Trenton Irwin have a interesting game here. Yosavash, the rookie, wouldn't be shocked to see him have a decent few targets in this matchup either. It's a low Vegas game total, so they're super deep dart throws. Just don't be shocked if you see 3 or 4 targets end up in those guys' directions. Getting into the run blocking, it's actually a little bit better here for Cincinnati. Number 19 in run blocking, Pittsburgh 24th. And then Cincinnati 15th in the run DVOA, Pittsburgh 17th. Nothing too great to write home about. Really, it's the adjusted sack rate that's a huge favor for Cincinnati, but that was with Burrow, so that might change, as I had said, with Browning. So the run game looking a little bit more effective here from Cincinnati, probably more of a Mixon style week, especially if Browning is going to kind of hold the ball or target some underneath stuff. Joe Mixon could see his fair share of targets as well. Really, it's just a gross game in terms of DFS. I'm not interested in anyone outside of probably the Pittsburgh running backs and maybe Jamar Chase if you think he's going to get hyper-targeted with 10, 12 targets in this matchup. But it's looking like a gross game, and kind of understand why. It looks like the run games are the best, and the kind of slower-paced teams. So growth all around for DFS, and hopefully you don't have to start too many of those players in your seasonal leagues. All right, whoops, went way down here. So New England at New York Giants is the matchup that is dead last on the slate. So 3.5-point road favorites for New England heading into the Giants Stadium. 34 Vegas game total, real nasty. I believe this was in the 33 or 32, but has been bet up a little bit since. That gives New England an 18.75 team implied total, 14th on the slate. Giants down at 15.25 is 20th on the slate. Getting into the New England side, number 5 in offensive pass protection, Giants 31st in the defensive pass rush. Really, the Giants shouldn't be getting any sacks here. We should see a decent amount of time for the Patriots to get the ball out. I want to say that pass protection being at number 5 is more of a result of their pace of play being number 1 overall, just getting the ball out quick. And that seems to be the way that they're attacking this particular offensive system with Bill O'Brien there this year. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's been working very well. So they're 27th in pass DVOA, the Giants 23rd in defensive pass DVOA. This has been going up a little bit in a good way for the Giants defense. I believe that used to be in the 30s, now at 23. Really what this is telling me, New England's going to get the ball out quick, and they might be a little bit more effective in that pass game than they're perhaps used to for the Giants. Not really sure who that's going to benefit. You know, Douglas has been kind of in play for New England. But outside of that, I'm not really too sure who else. You know, Juju is going to maybe get involved there. Hunter Henry, tight ends. I don't know. It's not really a good pass game. Douglas is probably the only one that you're interested in there for New England. Fortunately, the run blocking for New England looks like it's going to be a big favor. So Ramondre Stevenson is probably going to be how they move the ball this week. So 17th in offensive run blocking. 26th in the Giants for their run stopping. New England 16th in run DVOA. Giants 28th in run DVOA. Really what this is telling me, New England probably going to be moving the ball on the ground. It's going to be a big Ramondre Stevenson week for New England, probably pounding it down the Giants' throats. Getting into the Giants side, they're really bad on offense. The only one that isn't dead last is offensive run blocking, and that's at 31. So second to the last, their offense is just bad across the board. So getting into the New England defensive side, they're 30th in pass rush, and 21st in pass DVOA. This is telling me the Giants probably going to have a little bit more time or a lot more time than they're used to throwing the ball. And then defensive pass DVOA, 21st for the Patriots isn't very good. Maybe they're a little bit more effective passing the ball. So saw DeVito and Slayton kind of hook up last week and have a pretty solid week that could continue in a situation like this where they have some time to throw the ball. Just keep that in mind. Just not going to be something I attack with a 34 Vegas game total here. And then the run game is going to be pretty poor from the looks of it. New England 19 and stopping the run is below average, but they're top 6 in the defensive run DVOA. So really wouldn't expect Barkley to be very effective on the ground. If he's going to do anything, it's going to be via the air. But really, he does get a lot of volume just because he's kind of the only show in town. I think him and Slayton are really the only options that you can do in DFS. And then kind of Stevenson on the other side in terms of DFS. Otherwise, I'm really not interested in playing any more of those cats on a really low game total. All right, let's get into the final games here. That's the end of the main slate. So we're going to do Sunday Night Football Island game and Monday Night Football Island game. Kind of get into a good Vegas game total here, 48. Baltimore heading into the Los Angeles Chargers as 3-point home favorites. Baltimore 25.5 team implied total. Chargers at 22.5 team implied total. With this 48 Vegas game total, it's pretty high. They're kind of suggesting that this is going to be a pretty high-scoring affair. With that in mind, it kind of starts putting the defenses in the back burner in terms of people that I want to start in an island game matchup with a Vegas game total that high. Getting into the Baltimore offensive side, they're 24th in pass protection. Los Angeles 4th in the defensive pass rush, but we did see Bosa go out with an injury. I think he's out for the season, so that's probably going to change. I'd expect Baltimore to have a little bit more time than they're otherwise probably would have had in a matchup like this. Getting into the pass DVOA, though, Baltimore number 8, so they've been really effective passing the ball. The Chargers 26 in the pass DVOA. So while they've been getting a lot of sacks, that pass game has really just been getting dominated. All the wide receivers go off against the Chargers. So Baltimore, I don't hate any of the 3 options that they have there as terms of wide receivers with Odell Beckham, Bateman, and Flowers. If any of those guys can't go, it looks like Nelson Aguilar is over there as well. He could be in play. We do have Isaiah Likely coming in at tight end in a matchup like this where the Ravens should be very effective passing the ball. Run blocking should be just as effective, if not better, for Baltimore. They're number 7 in run blocking, Chargers 23rd. Baltimore number 1 in offensive run DVOA, Chargers 26th. So really what this is telling me that pretty much anyone from Baltimore on their offense is in play in an island game matchup like this. Kind of depends on how you think they're going to score. Is it going to be really big chunk yards in the pass game? Then you're probably going to want Lamar and someone like Flowers, and then bringing it back with Gus Edwards, something like that. Maybe Isaiah Likely as well, if he's going to be cheap, but I doubt he will be, considering we knew the injury ahead of time. So kind of interesting there on the Baltimore side. Almost everyone's in play. We'll have to kind of look at this Chargers side to see if there's anything we can glean. And then also kind of depends on what the salaries are for those people on the Baltimore side. Getting into the Chargers, they're number 8 in pass protection. Baltimore number 2 in defensive pass rush. Chargers number 5 in the offensive pass DVOA. Baltimore number 2 in the defensive pass rush. What this is telling me, the Chargers are probably going to struggle a little bit more than they're used to passing the ball. We've seen kind of since Mike Williams went down that this Chargers offense has just not been quite the same. Despite these green numbers here in the offensive pass protection, it seems like they've been struggling a little bit more lately. Just in general, they got a lot of injuries. Mike Williams, as I had said before, Palmer's out. Quentin Johnston hasn't done anything as a rookie, and it seems like kind of a bust this season. So I think this offensive pass game is going to kind of stall out, especially if all they have to do is stop Keenan Allen, and then their pass game options are taken away outside of Eckler in terms of anybody decent getting the ball in their hands. So Quentin Johnson doesn't seem like he's solid. Maybe they know going into this that Baltimore is really good at getting after the quarterback, so they're going to kind of keep the ball underneath, run some shorter routes, which is always good for Keenan Allen, but maybe they get some bubble screens or something for Quentin Johnson, who seems like he's more of a yak wide receiver than somebody that's a decent route runner. But really, I think it's just going to lead to more Eckler dump-offs more than anything with the wide receiver crew the way it is. Speaking of Eckler, that run game, 28th for the Chargers, 17th for Baltimore. The run DVOA for the Chargers, 24th, number 7 for Baltimore, and the defensive run DVOA. Really wouldn't expect Eckler to have a very solid game on the ground. If he's going to get there, it's going to be via the air and kind of getting some dump-offs from Herbert. But really, the way that this is setting up, I'm looking at Baltimore and probably getting 4 or 5 players from Baltimore and just 1 from the Chargers. With that run game being so ineffective and this pass game looking like kind of a stalemate, I may just get the Chargers kicker in this matchup and see what happens from there. Maybe they get 2 or 3 before they get down big here from Baltimore. But interesting game there. I think Baltimore does ultimately win this. Looks like they'll be a lot better on offense. Chargers maybe struggle a little bit there. All right, last game here, Monday Night Football. Let's get into it. Chicago heading into Minnesota. Minnesota 3-point home favorites. It's a 43 Vegas game total. This starts getting into the range where I'm interested in potentially looking at kickers and defenses just because the game total is pretty low there. And the skill players based off of that might not be scoring that many. If you get a kicker that scores 8, he's probably in the top 6 players in the week or in this particular game in terms of fantasy points. Getting into that Chicago side, number 26 in offensive pass protection, Minnesota 19th in the pass rush, slightly in the favor there of Minnesota. Pass DVOA for Chicago, number 23, Minnesota number 9. A lot of these numbers, kind of back and forth between Fields and Bagent. Minnesota, though, top 10 in defensive pass DVOA. I would expect that to kind of continue to fruition, where Chicago maybe not very effective passing the ball just in general, but DJ Moore, really the only option. Cole Kmet kind of as a secondary option. Again, this is the island game matchup. This isn't looking like a super great matchup, but if you're going to attack the pass game, it's going to be one of those two. The run blocking side looks like it might be a little bit better for Chicago. They're number 6 in offensive run blocking. Minnesota number 15 in stopping the run. And then defense or offensive run DVOA, Chicago number 9, Minnesota number 9. That's a pretty even matchup. Depending on what this looks like, I don't know. Foreman kind of left with an injury. I don't know off the top of my head what that looks like. Could be a 3-headed monster here from Chicago, and if that's the case, I'm probably interested in avoiding a lot of these running backs. Otherwise, if Foreman's out, I'm actually pretty interested in Herbert in the island game matchup here. I think he ends up being the better of the two in a situation like this. Getting into the Minnesota side, they're 14th in offensive pass protection. Chicago 32nd in defensive pass rush. And then Minnesota number 12 in the offensive pass DVOA, and Chicago 27th in pass DVOA. So really what this is telling me, Minnesota is going to have plenty of time to throw, and they should be pretty effective throwing the ball. We do have Justin Jefferson ruled out already, so Jordan Addison certainly in play, Hawkinson certainly in play, KJ Osborne, if you need somebody cheap, could also be in play here. Getting into the run blocking, Minnesota number 16, Chicago number 2 in defensive run stopping, so they've been pretty effective there. And then the run DVOA, Minnesota 28, Chicago 11. I am looking to avoid that Minnesota run game, so if I'm looking at anything, it's probably the Minnesota pass game to carry the torch here. It's a lower Vegas game total, and I wouldn't expect Chicago's defense necessarily to be in play with the lack of pressure here, but we have seen Fields take quite a few sacks. If they're going to be running the ball a little bit heavier into a matchup that's not great, I think Minnesota's defense is in play here. I do think Minnesota's kicker could also be in play. I think the the pass game is strong enough that they're going to score some points via touchdowns, but that run game looks like it's going to be pretty poor, and that could lead to 2 or 3 field goals there from Greg Joseph, their kicker, and I think Minnesota pass game defense kicker certainly in play, and then on the Chicago side, either Herbert or just Justin Fields solo. Probably going to be how I'm attacking this particular island game. All right, that's going to do it for the adjusted line play report. For those of you who are new, hopefully you learned a little bit about how to look at these numbers, what the numbers mean when they're close, what the numbers mean when there's a huge gap in the favor of the offense or the defense, and kind of how to put together a game script and what players should be doing well in each individual matchup. That's really what we're here for, to give you the play in the trenches, which a lot of times tells us what that game script is for the week and the players that are going to do well based off of that game script. So, like I said, hopefully you learned something. That's the ultimate name of the game. You take this info along with everything else that you're doing and go out there and make some really good decisions on your prop bets, on your DFS lineups, and your start-sit decisions in your seasonal long leagues, and you go out and you win money. And we do that together with this info that you got with the adjusted line play report and everything else that you're getting on the week. So really appreciate the watch. Thanks for everybody that made it this far into the adjusted line play report. I hope you go out there and win some money, and that's what we're trying to do, is win some money together. Thanks, folks. Have a good one. Bye.